My son slapped me at his father's funeral. Not by accident, he meant it. The sound hit harder than grief itself. I was still holding your father's folded flag, 27 years of service reduced to one bruise. Then he said, "This isn't your home anymore. Get out." I didn't drop the flag. I just walked out. 35 years of bills, paint, and sacrifice behind me, and my name still on the deed. Mic drop line. He took the house, but he forgot who built it. It's strange how loud silence can be after a funeral. You hear everything, the hum of the fridge, the shuffle of polite shoes, the sound of people trying not to say what they really mean. That afternoon, the house was full. Neighbors, cousins, old friends from Peter's station. They brought casseroles and condolences, spoke softly, stayed too long. I kept pouring coffee, refilling plates, pretending my hands weren't shaking. That's what widows do, right? We host our own loss. In the kitchen, Daniel laughed with Claire, too loud for a house still wearing black. She moved through the room like it already belonged to her. I heard her say, "We'll probably repaint soon. Mom likes those darker colors." 5 feet away, like I wasn't even standing there, I let it slide. Grief makes people careless, but then she came closer, fixing the scarf on my shoulder as if she owned the gesture. "You don't have to stay here alone forever, Mom. This place is too big for you. Too big for me." Just 4 words. But they hit harder than the eulogy. I looked around. The couch Peter saved 3 months of pay for, the table he built the year Daniel was born. Every corner paid for twice, once with money, once with time. I said quietly, "This house has always fit just fine." She smiled, polite and sharp. "Of course, I just meant it's a lot to manage." But it wasn't about managing. It was about owning. Daniel came over, arm around her shoulder. "You doing okay, Mom?" I wanted to ask. "Do you hear what she's saying?" But his eyes were tired, and I didn't want another argument at his father's wake. By nightfall, the cars were gone. Goodbyes had started to sound like endings. The kitchen was clean, the air heavy. Claire stayed behind, still moving through the rooms, touching what wasn't hers. She opened the drawer with Peter's tools. "We should probably clear this out soon," she said. I stepped closer. "There's no rush." She didn't even look up. "It's better to do it now, before it becomes too hard later." She said it like she was doing me a favor. I went upstairs. On the landing, I stopped. The photos on the wall, us, in younger years, were covered in dust. I wiped one clean. That picture was taken the day we made our last mortgage payment. 35 years, every check signed by our hands. We thought we'd finally made it. Downstairs, I heard them whispering. "Mortgage." "Responsibility." "Lawyer." The words drifted up like smoke. Later that night, Daniel came into the kitchen, careful and calm. "Mom," he said, "you don't have to handle everything anymore. Claire and I can take care of the bills, the house. You should rest. Rest." That word again, the polite word for move aside. "I've handled the bills for 35 years, Daniel." He smiled small. "We just want to help." "Help," I repeated. "Is that what this is?" He looked down. "It's just time for a change." Peter hadn't even been gone a week, and they were already planning the future without me in it. When he went upstairs, I sat at the table, the same one Peter built, staring at the empty chair across from me. We used to drink coffee there every morning. He'd always say, "We'll get to it, honey. We always do." Now it was just me, the quiet and the sound of their laughter echoing from above. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the roof we patched, the paint we redid, the years we stretched paychecks just to make the mortgage. Everything we'd built together, now treated like inventory. I never thought I'd feel like a guest in my own home. But the truth was already there, whispering through the walls. The next morning, I heard Claire on the phone. "Yes, we'll talk to the lawyer about transferring things. It's just a matter of paperwork now." Paperwork. That's what she called erasing me. I sat in the hallway, my hands shaking but my mind steady. Peter once warned me, before he got sick, "If anything happens to me, don't let them take what's yours." That morning, I stopped being the quiet one. I didn't say a word, not yet, but something in me had already turned. They thought I'd lost my voice. But silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. The next morning was too quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort, only warns. Claire was humming while flipping pancakes like it was any other Sunday. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling through his phone, not meeting my eyes. The air smelled like syrup and grief, sweet, heavy, impossible to swallow. I poured myself some coffee, still wearing the same black dress from the funeral. My hands smelled of lilies and sleeplessness. On the table, a folder waited. Thick, neat, clipped shut, sitting beside a vase of flowers already curling brown at the edges. Daniel looked up, voice light. "Hey, Mom. We've been talking about the house and the bills. I think it's best if we get some paperwork done now, while everything's still clear." I stared at the folder. "What kind of paperwork?" "Just a power of attorney," he said quickly. "Nothing big, it's just a formality. Helps us manage things for you, the bank, taxes, insurance." Claire slid a pen toward me like a cashier sliding a receipt. "Yeah," she added, smiling too gently. "We don't want you stressing. You should rest." That word again. Rest. Every time she said it, it sounded less like care and more like a lock clicking shut. I opened the folder. My name was everywhere, printed, repeated, formal. I read slowly, like I used to when Peter's eyesight started to fade. Then I saw it. Transfer of authority. I looked up. "What exactly does this let you do?" Daniel shifted in his chair. "It just lets me handle decisions for you, Mom. It's legal language, nothing to worry about." "So if I sign this," I said, "you could make choices about the house, the bank, everything?" He hesitated. "Yes, but it's temporary. We're just trying to make things easier." Claire leaned forward, voice soft as sugar. "You've done enough, Evelyn. Let us take it from here." Her eyes didn't match her tone. They were sharp, calculating. I set the pen down. "You can handle paperwork," I said slowly, "but not my life." The room froze. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Daniel exhaled. "Mom, please, we're not taking anything from you." "Then why are you pushing this?" He rubbed his forehead. "Because you always overthink things. Dad would have wanted me to help." That name, Dad, twisted the air between us. My eyes fell on the first page, in reference to the estate of Peter Grace. The words blurred. My hand trembled. The coffee spilled, a dark spreading stain that soaked the edge of the paper until his name disappeared into brown. No one moved. Claire reached for a napkin. "It's fine," she said, weak. "We can print another copy." I stood up. "No, you won't need to." "Mom?" I said no. Daniel frowned, the tone of a man used to being obeyed. "Why are you making this so hard?" "Because you're asking me to disappear on paper," I said. Silence. Thick. Final. He didn't answer. He just looked at Claire, then back at me, as if trying to decide whether to keep pretending. I folded the wet page and dropped it in the trash. "If you ever put something like this in front of me again," I said quietly, "make sure you understand what you're asking for." Then I walked out before either of them could find their next lie. Upstairs, I sat on the edge of the bed, hands shaking. My throat burned, but no tears came. I wasn't surprised. I'd seen it coming. I just didn't think it would come this soon. Peter's voice echoed in my memory. "If I go first, don't let anyone make decisions for you." I never thought he meant our son. Their voices drifted up through the floor, muffled but clear enough. "Claire, she'll come around. She doesn't understand how these things work." Daniel, "Yeah, I'll talk to her again later." I stayed still, listening to the sound of betrayal being planned under my own roof. After a while, I opened the dresser drawer. The small envelope Peter had given me lay untouched, edges worn. I brushed my fingers over it but didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I pulled out my old file folder, the mortgage, the deed, every payment receipt from 1989 to now. I spread them across the bed like evidence. My name was there beside his on every page. Peter and Evelyn Grace. Not just Peter, never just Peter. No one could erase that, not even family. When I was done, I locked the folder back in place and exhaled for the first time in days. They thought grief had softened me. That being alone had made me easy to move. But they forgot who signed the first loan, who kept the lights on through 5 layoffs and 3 recessions. I wouldn't fight them yet. Not with anger, not with noise. I'd learned long ago, silence can cut deeper than shouting. If they ever tried to make me sign something again, it wouldn't be my name they erased. It would be theirs. The house felt hollow that morning, too clean, too quiet. I went upstairs just to escape the sound of my own heartbeat echoing off the kitchen walls. The coffee on the counter had gone cold, and every cup in the sink still smelled faintly of lilies from the funeral. I thought cleaning might help, might make the house feel normal again, but when I opened Peter's door, normal was gone. At first, I thought they'd moved things to tidy up, but the longer I stood there, the clearer it became. There was nothing left to clean. The shelves were bare, the bed gone. Even the rug had vanished. The room looked gutted like a chest after the heart's been taken out. On the wall, taped in fresh ink, were 3 words in big printed letters: Claire's studio. For a moment, I couldn't move. My chest tightened. This was Peter's room, where he kept his old guitar, his fire captain's uniform, the notebooks he never finished. Every Saturday morning, he used to sit by that window, tuning the same beat-up instrument, humming low. "Music stays," he'd say, even when people don't. He was right. Except now, even the music was gone. I walked to the corner where his guitar case used to rest. The wood floor still held a faint shadow from where it stood for 15 years. I knelt, tracing the outline with my fingers. Cold, smooth, empty. For a second, I almost heard him laugh again, but the only sound was drilling downstairs and the sour smell of fresh paint pushing through the hall. When I went down, Daniel was on his laptop, eyes glued to the screen. Claire was opening boxes, cheerful as if this were spring cleaning instead of erasing a life. I steadied my voice. "Daniel, where are your father's things?" He didn't look up. "We packed them." "Packed them where?" Claire answered before he could. "We donated most of it. His uniform went to the fire station. They said they'd love to display it. You should be proud." I stared at her. "You donated his uniform?" The words came out low, careful. Daniel nodded. "He'd want that, Mom. He wouldn't want everything collecting dust." His tone was calm, too calm, like he'd practiced saying it. I said quietly, "He would have wanted me to decide that." Claire laughed lightly. "You're still grieving, I get it. But holding on doesn't help anyone. We all have to move forward." I stepped closer. "That wasn't yours to touch." She folded her arms. "We live here too, you know." "No," I said steady. "You stay here. There's a difference." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Mom, please. We're just trying to help." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the paper upstairs said otherwise. Claire's studio. It wasn't about helping. It was about replacing. I went back upstairs, sat on the bare floor. My knees ached, but I didn't move. The walls were stripped, the air too clean. This was the same room where Peter had fixed his amp, laughing when sparks flew. The same place where, 20 years ago, he'd brought home his captain's helmet, scratched heavy his pride. Every mark had a story. And now it was gone, traded for a can of paint. The hammer downstairs kept striking, steady and careless. With every blow, something inside me settled. Not grief this time, but clarity. They weren't just redecorating, they were rewriting. That night, the house smelled of paint, thinner, and loss. I sat in the kitchen, my tea gone cold, tracing circles on the wood table with my thumb. Just a few weeks ago, Peter was sitting there, talking about fixing the fence before winter. Now, his tools were gone. His name was fading, and they called it healing. I whispered to the empty room. They call it donation. I call it erasure. The words hung in the air, heavy and right. After midnight, I walked upstairs again. The hallway light flickered. I stopped in front of the door that used to be his. I didn't go in. I just stood there, holding that crumpled paper with her name on it. And in that silence, I heard my own voice. Clear, certain. If they can take one room, they can take everything. So I made myself a promise. No more waiting for respect. No more explaining pain to people who refuse to feel it. They thought they could box up my life one drawer at a time. They thought I was too tired, too quiet, too small to fight back. But they forgot who built this house, who signed the first loan, who kept every receipt, every deed, every truth. I folded the paper with her name on it into my pocket, locked the door to my room, and sat on the bed. The air was cold, but for the first time since Peter's funeral, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. I should have seen it coming. The tension had been building for days. Whispers behind closed doors, boxes shifting after midnight, the hum of secrets moving through the floorboards. Daniel couldn't look me in the eye anymore. And that morning, it broke. It started small, the kind of moment that seems harmless until it explodes. Claire was rearranging the living room again, dragging Peter's old armchair across the floor, the one he sat in every night, reading until he fell asleep. I told her to stop. "That chair stays where it is," she laughed. "It's just furniture, Mom." That word, just. Everything I loved was always just something to them. Daniel came in, already sighing. "What's going on?" Before I could answer, Claire jumped in. "Your mother's upset again. I was just trying to make the place look better." I looked at her, then at him, waiting for one word. Loyalty. But he only said, "Mom, why do you fight every change we make? This house isn't a museum." I said quietly, "No, it's not. It's a memory. Every wall here holds something your father built with his own hands." Claire crossed her arms. "And now it's time for us to build ours. You can't live in the past forever." That was the moment I finally understood. This wasn't about grief or divorce. It was about control. About who still had a voice in the house I paid for. One bill, one repair, one winter at a time. I turned to Daniel. "You think you're honoring him, but you're erasing him." He met my eyes, calm but distant. "We're not erasing him, Mom. We're moving forward. You should too." My hands shook. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I said, "Moving forward doesn't mean stepping over me." He frowned. "Why do you have to make everything so hard? We're doing this for you." "For me?" I asked. "You call taking my home, my memories, my choices, for me?" He slammed his hand on the table. The sound cracked through the room. "Enough. You can't keep controlling everything. You don't even know what's best for yourself anymore." Something in me shifted. Not anger, clarity. "You think because I'm old, you get to decide when I stop living?" His face twisted, then came the sound. Sharp, final, irreversible. His hand across my cheek. For a moment, the world stilled. I felt the heat spread, but the real wound was deeper. The silence that followed. Claire gasped, her hand over her mouth. Daniel froze, as if realizing too late that the line he'd crossed could never be undone. I didn't touch my face. I didn't blink. I just looked at him and said, steady, "You'll remember this day more than I will." He tried to speak, but I raised my hand slightly. Not to stop him, just to show I didn't need to hear a word. I turned, walked to my room, and closed the door. My fingers trembled as I reached under the bed for the old wooden box and Peter's. Letters, the will, the mortgage papers, everything he told me to keep safe. I packed it into a tote bag along with one photograph. The three of us on the porch, back when Daniel still held my hand instead of turning away. Downstairs, their voices bled together, panic, guilt, excuses. "Claire, what did you do? She's your mother." He didn't answer. I didn't wait to hear more. I opened the front door. The cold hit like a second slap. But this one felt clean, honest. I stepped outside, slow and steady, the wind tugging at my coat. Claire called my name, but I didn't turn around. I didn't owe them that. Every step peeled away another layer of silence. All the years I'd swallowed my words just to keep peace. At the end of the driveway, I stopped. My cheeks still burned, but my chest felt light. For the first time in years, the weight wasn't mine. The house behind me looked smaller. Maybe it always was. People say a slap fades fast. They're wrong. It echoes. It rewrites how you hear your own name. It teaches you that love without respect is just routine, and routines break easier than trust. I kept walking. I didn't have much. A box, a coat, the truth. But that was enough. They could keep the furniture, the walls, the silence. I would take what mattered, the years, the proof, the name still printed beside Peter's on that deed. The wind picked up as I reached the corner. I pulled my coat tighter and whispered, "You'll remember this day?" Then I smiled, not out of joy, but out of certainty. Because he would. Every time he crossed that threshold, every time he touched the walls he thought were his, he'd remember the sound that split the silence and the sight of his mother walking away. That was the day he lost me. Not because I was gone, but because I finally chose to leave. The neon sign outside my window kept flickering. Blue Moon Motel, half the bulbs burned out, the rest gasping to stay alive. The hum of the old heater filled the silence, and the radio by the nightstand crackled like it was trying to breathe. They were playing some song from 1977, Take It All Back. The words landed like a dare. I hadn't meant to end up here. I just needed somewhere that didn't sound like them. Somewhere I could think. The air smelled of bleach and old coffee, but the bed was clean, and for the first time in weeks, no one told me what I could or couldn't do. I sat by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of motel coffee gone cold, watching the parking lot glow blue under the dying sign. A soft knock. The boy from the front desk, Oliver, maybe 20 at most, stood there holding another cup. Kind eyes, careful voice. You okay, ma'am? I smiled faintly, just tired of being quiet. He nodded like he'd heard that before. Holler if you need anything. When he left, the sound of his footsteps faded into the hum of the heater. I stared at the reflection of the sign on the glass. Flicker, die, return. I knew that rhythm. I'd been living it. After a while, I reached for the old wooden box, Peter's box, the one he told me to never lose. Inside was an envelope I'd carried for 41 days without opening. Tonight I did. Inside, a small silver flash drive, the kind you buy at a gas station with his handwriting across a strip of tape. Just in case. My fingers trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. The screen blinked, slow and tired, before the files appeared. Deed, Jard 1989, PDF, Will, 14B, PDF, Mortgage, .pdf, Voice, .mp3. The deed came first, my name, Evelyn Grace, clear and black across the page. 35 years of labor, late payments, and paint-stained hands condensed into that one signature. Then the will, signed 5 months before he got sick. Beneath his name was one line in his handwriting. In the event of dispute or mistreatment, activate Clause 14B. Clause 14B. I didn't know what it meant yet. But Peter never wrote anything without reason. Finally, I clicked on the voice file. For a moment, there was static. Then his voice. Steady, familiar, unmistakable. If you're hearing this, something's happened I hoped never would. But listen, Eve, this house, our house, breathes your name. It was never just mine. Every wall, every payment, every sleepless night, yours. If they ever try to move you out, remember this. They're standing on your signature. My hand covered my mouth. I forgot how deep his voice could reach when he said my name. It wasn't grief that came next. It was clarity. He'd known. He'd seen this before I did. I played it again. Twice. A third time. Until I could repeat it word for word. If they ever try to move you out, remember this house breathes your name. The motel light flickered against the screen. Blue, white, dark, blue again, and I saw myself reflected in it. Not the quiet widow they thought they could erase, but the woman who still held the proof. I created a new folder and renamed everything. Proof. Inside, I saved every file. The deed, the will, the mortgage, scanned copies of old receipts from the bank, photos of Peter fixing the roof in 2008. I wasn't building a house this time. I was building armor. Outside, the radio kept repeating the chorus. Take it all back. I almost laughed. That was exactly what I was going to do. I opened my notebook and started a list. Bank, lawyer, stop the payments, secure the deed. Each line steadied me. Each word rebuilt something they tried to take apart. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was preparing. Around midnight, the neon sign flickered again. For a second, I imagined Peter sitting beside me, sleeves rolled up, that same half smile. You always were stronger than you thought, Eve. I whispered back. Maybe I just needed a reason. The laptop dimmed. I closed it gently. The heater hummed. Rain started tapping the window. The world outside was small and still, but it finally sounded like mine. I walked to the mirror. The bruise on my cheek had turned the color of rust, but my eyes were clear. The woman staring back wasn't broken. She was awake. I turned off the radio, but the last line of the song stayed with me. I'd take it all back just to start again. I smiled just once. I'm not taking it back, I whispered. I'm taking it forward. The light from the blue moon sign flickered one last time, casting its soft, stubborn glow across the room. For the first time in months, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel erased. Tomorrow, the silence would end. I didn't sleep that night. The motel heater hummed like a tired engine, and the glow from the laptop lit the papers spread across the blanket. 35 years of signatures, numbers, and quiet proof. Every line led back to one truth. I never stopped owning what I built. By sunrise, I already knew where I was going. The bank sat on the corner of Main Street, the same one Peter and I had walked into 35 years ago, holding a folder full of hope and a half-approved loan. Back then, I was nervous, checking our paperwork twice, praying we'd qualify. Now, I walked in steady. I had nothing left to lose and everything to reclaim. Inside, the air smelled of polish and paper. The woman at the counter smiled the way tellers are trained to smile. Her name tag read M. Carter. "Good morning," she said. "How can I help you today?" I placed my folder on the counter. "I need to speak with someone about a mortgage. The Grace residence on Hillview Lane." She typed a few keys, her tone still pleasant. "Of course. May I have your name?" "Evelyn Grace." She scanned the screen, then looked up. "You're listed as co-borrower and co-owner." "I know," I said. "Do you have your ID?" I handed it over, along with the original loan agreement Peter and I signed in 1989. She blinked, impressed. "People don't bring paper anymore." She nodded. "Everything checks out. What would you like to do?" "I'd like to stop the automatic payments," I said, "effective immediately." Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "You'd like to suspend them?" "Yes, and I'd like copies of the full file. The deed, payment history, ownership record." Something in her expression shifted, curiosity replacing procedure. "All right. Give me a few minutes, Mrs. Grace." As she disappeared through the frosted door, I rested my hands on the counter, steady. I thought of Peter handing me that pen all those years ago, saying, "You sign too, just in case." I hadn't realized then that he'd given me more than partnership. He'd given me leverage. Mel returned with a thick folder and set it down. "This is the complete record. You've been co-signer since day one. Any change to the mortgage or deed requires your consent." "Good," I said. "Then I'd like to withdraw that consent." She hesitated only a second, then slid 2 papers toward me. "You'll need to sign here and here." I took the pen. My hand didn't tremble. For decades, I'd signed for everyone else. For school forms, insurance, bills, sympathy cards. This one was different. It wasn't compliance. It was reclamation. Mel glanced up. "You're sure about this?" I met her eyes. "I've never been more sure." The printer behind her began to hum, a small rhythmic sound that felt almost holy. She tore the page free and handed it over. "Suspension confirmed. It takes effect within the day." Then, she smiled, soft but certain. "You still own half that house, Mrs. Grace. They can't change that without you." For a moment I couldn't speak. The weight of her words didn't feel like victory. It felt like peace. For 40 years, I'd been the one who kept the lights on, who paid the bills, who made it all work. And now, for once, my name stood alone, not beneath anyone's, not beside anyone's, just mine. "Thank you, Mel," I said. "You did the work," she replied. "I just printed the paper." The document's heading read "Suspension confirmed" in bold black letters. I traced the words with my thumb, memorizing the texture. I gathered my papers, zipped the folder, and turned to leave. "You take care, Mrs. Grace," she said. I smiled. "I finally am." Outside, the morning air felt sharp, almost electric. I stepped down the concrete stairs, the sound of the printer still echoing faintly in my head. For years, machines had hummed for others. Dishwashers, washing machines, typewriters. But that sound, that precise rhythm of paper feeding through ink, felt like the first noise that belonged to me. I tucked the file under my arm, the pages still warm. The wind caught my scarf and I let it go. For once, I didn't fix it. I let it move. As I reached the crosswalk, the red light blinked. I stood there, the folder pressed to my chest. Inside were not just documents, but 35 years of proof, of effort, of silence turned into evidence. Through the glass doors behind me, I heard the faint hum of the printer again, another page sliding out, steady and sure. And in that sound, I could almost hear Peter's voice. "Told you to keep those papers safe." I smiled as the light changed and stepped forward. For the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking toward it. The number on the business card looked familiar. It took me a second to place it. I'd written it down years ago, when one of Peter's friends mentioned a lawyer who specialized in elder clients, a woman who fought for the ones people tried to push aside. Her name was Emma Brooks. Back in college, we used to sit in the back row of every lecture, whispering jokes about professors who called us girls instead of women. She was bold, loud, impossible to intimidate. I was the quiet one, the note-taker, the peacekeeper. After graduation, life divided us the way it always does. Jobs, bills, kids, time. She went to law school. I went to the clinic. 30 years vanished like pages torn from a calendar. When she answered, her voice came through warm and familiar. "Evelyn Grace?" she said, half laughing. "You have no idea how long it's been." "Too long," I said. "I need help, Emma." Not as a client, as a friend who's out of her depth. Her tone shifted instantly. "Then come see me. 3rd and Maple, Brooks and Wells. And Eve." She paused, her voice steady. "Whatever it is, we'll fix it." I didn't expect to cry just from hearing her voice, but I did. Quietly, after I hung up. Her office sat inside an old brick building that used to be a bank. The gold lettering on the glass read, "Brooks and Wells, Elder Rights and Family Advocacy." Inside, it smelled like paper, ink, and strong coffee, the perfume of persistence. She looked up from her desk, froze, then broke into that same wild grin I remembered. 30 years, and you still part your hair the same," she said, coming around the desk to hug me tight. "And you still talk too loud," I said, laughing. Her laugh filled the room, fearless and unapologetic. For a moment, I wasn't an old widow with bruises under her makeup. I was 20 again, remembering who I used to be. We sat across from each other, the folder between us. Emma opened it, scanning the pages quickly. Mortgage records, signatures, the will. Her pen tapped softly as her eyes caught on one paragraph. "Clause 14B, she said. "This one's gold." I leaned forward. "You understand it?" She smiled like a woman who'd waited years to say finally. "Understand it?" "Evelyn, this clause is bulletproof. Peter must have worked with someone sharp. It states that if your son or any heir tries to remove you from the property or commits abuse, verbal or physical, their inheritance rights are immediately void. Everything reverts to you instantly." I stared at her. "So it's real. It holds." "It doesn't just hold," she said. "It stands like concrete." I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until then. Relief hit hard, not victory, but release. The kind that makes you sit back and remember how heavy the years have been. Emma leaned in, studying me. "You know, I've handled 100 of these cases, but it's different seeing your name on the paperwork. We used to talk about fighting the system, remember? I guess we still are, just older now, with better stationery." That made me laugh, the kind that comes from deep in the ribs. "Remember Professor Langston?" I said. "The one who told us women in advocacy should leave the tough work to the men?" She groaned. "Oh, God. Don't remind me. You stood up and told him, 'Then I guess you won't last long in this room, sir.'" I blinked. "I said that?" "You did," she grinned. "You weren't half as quiet as you thought." I looked down at the folder. I guess I forgot how to be that woman for a while. Emma reached across the desk and took my hand. "You didn't forget. You just went quiet. There's a difference. Quiet women don't disappear, they wait." That sentence landed like a strike. For years, I'd mistaken silence for surrender. But sitting there with sunlight spilling across her desk and my name on every page, I realized silence had been armor, not absence. She began sorting the documents into neat piles. "Here's what we'll do. I'll file the activation notice under Clause 14B. I'll contact your son's attorney and freeze all estate actions. Once the notice clears, ownership transfers back to you, fully and legally. They'll have no grounds to contest it." Her tone was steady, her pen moving fast. The sound of justice written in ink. I swallowed. "Emma, I don't want to ruin his life. I just want mine back." She stopped, looked up. "Sometimes, Eve," she said quietly, "they're the same thing." The room fell still except for the scratch of her pen. She slid the documents toward me. "Initial here and here. Congratulations, you're executor now." I signed. My hand didn't shake. I'd been signing things my whole life. Permission slips, bills, sympathy cards, always for others. This time it was for me. It wasn't obligation. It was authority. Emma watched me finish and smiled softly. "There she is," she said, "the Evelyn I remember." I laughed. A real one this time. God, I missed her. We stood by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one, gold, steady, defiant. Two women once called too soft, too polite, too quiet. Under the warm yellow light of her office, we didn't look quiet anymore. We looked ready. The clock passed midnight, and the apartment sank into that sharp kind of silence that lets you hear your own pulse. I sat at the table, one candle burning low beside a blank sheet of paper. The flame wavered every time I breathed. For days, I'd known this moment would come, the one where I'd stop rehearsing what I should say to Daniel and finally write what I needed to. Not to defend, not to accuse, just to tell the truth that had waited too long. I picked up the pen. My hand wasn't as steady as it used to be, but the words came anyway, slow and deliberate. Daniel, I carried you for 9 months. I gave up sleep, money, and dreams to keep you safe. And in one afternoon, you erased me. You didn't see your mother. You saw an obstacle. The ink bled slightly where my hand trembled. I paused, not to cry, but to steady my breathing. The pain wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled, like a scar that had decided to stay. I'm not writing to make you feel guilty. Guilt fades. I'm writing so you'll remember. That day, you didn't just push me out of a house. You pushed out the woman who stayed up when you were sick, who covered for you when you failed, who stayed silent so you could speak louder. For years, I thought silence was the same as peace. But I know better now. Silence doesn't keep peace. It protects the one making the noise. I used to think love meant giving until there was nothing left. Now I know love also means drawing a line. Your father taught me that before he died. He said, "Eve, don't let kindness turn into permission." I smiled faintly, hearing Peter's voice, calm, certain, unshakable. You'll learn someday that respect isn't owed by title, it's earned by memory. And right now, the memory of you hurts. But pain has purpose. It teaches. I stopped writing, folded my hands, and stared at the candle flame. For years, I'd given everything to protect him, Sahi, and I did. But now, the only thing left to protect was myself. I forgive you, not because you asked, not because you deserve it, but because peace costs less than anger. And I've already paid enough. One day, when you look in the mirror, I hope you see what it costs to stay quiet too long. I reached for the small wooden box beside me, the one that held the few photos I hadn't packed away. On top was a picture of Daniel at 10 years old, sitting on Peter's shoulders, laughing. The world had been small then, simple, safe. I slipped that photo into the envelope with the letter. My voice came out as a whisper. Some letters aren't meant to be sent. They're meant to remind you who you were before the noise began. I sealed the envelope, pressing it flat with both palms. It wasn't for the post office, it was for the mirror. The one in the hallway I used to pass every morning before the years blurred together. I stood and placed the letter against the glass. My reflection stared back. Older, yes, but steadier too. I saw the woman Peter believed in. The one Emma reminded me still existed. The one Daniel had forgotten, but might one day recognize. The candle flickered, then bent in the draft. Its shadow trembled across the wall. Tomorrow, I whispered, we face it. A soft gust slipped through the cracked window and the flame went out. Not violently, just quietly, as if it knew its work was done. In the dark, I could still see the outline of the envelope, the faint shape of the photo inside. I didn't move it. I left it there. Not for him to find, but for me to remember. Tomorrow would bring lawyers, signatures, and faces that once called me Mom. But tonight was for truth, the kind you write once in ink so it can finally rest. The dining room was too bright. White light from the ceiling spilled across every polished surface. Silverware gleaming, framed photos flashing back faces, that didn't feel like family anymore. I sat at the far end of the table. Not at the head, not at the side. Just there, present. Daniel sat across from me, fingers locked, eyes rimmed red but dry. Claire was beside him, spine straight, smile thin and practiced, the kind you wear when you're not sure who's winning. At the other end sat Emma, calm and deliberate, a brown folder open before her like a gavel waiting to drop. The air hummed, the refrigerator's low buzz carried through the quiet. Coffee sat untouched between us, its warmth fading the way civility does before a storm. Claire broke first. Can we just talk like family? I met her gaze, steady, unshaken. Family talks don't start with lawyers. Her mouth tightened. Daniel shifted in his seat, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Emma cleared her throat, a voice smooth but edged with steel. We're here to discuss the activation of Clause 14B in Mr. Peter Grace's supplemental will, she began. Mrs. Grace has provided evidence of verbal and physical mistreatment, as well as unlawful eviction from the marital home. Daniel sat up straight. That's not... Emma lifted a hand, calm but firm. Please let me finish. He swallowed the rest of his words. She continued. According to the terms of this clause, if any heir engages in behavior that constitutes abuse or forced removal of Mrs. Grace from her property, all inheritance rights are revoked. Ownership of all assets reverts entirely to her. The room froze. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Claire leaned forward. So that's it? You're taking the house? You're punishing your own son? I'm not punishing anyone, I said evenly. I'm protecting what's mine. She laughed under her breath. What's yours? You think that house belongs to you? You wouldn't even have it if Daniel hadn't. Emma's tone cut through like glass. If Daniel hadn't what, Mrs. Carter? Attempted to throw his mother out of her legal home? The deed lists her as co-owner. The mortgage was paid under her name for 35 years. Silence. Claire's mouth snapped shut. Daniel's voice came low. Mom, please. It wasn't supposed to go this far. We were upset. It was the funeral. We weren't thinking. I looked straight at him. You were thinking clearly enough to change the locks. He flinched. For a moment I saw a flicker of the boy he used to be, the one who'd run home from school clutching crayon drawings like trophies. The memory almost softened me. Almost. Emma reached into her folder and pulled out a small black recorder. She pressed play. A voice, his voice, filled the room. This isn't your home anymore. Get out. Then the sharp crack of a slap. Then silence. Even the yee-ee. Coffee steam stopped rising. Emma turned it off. This is sufficient to confirm activation of Clause 14B, she said quietly. Daniel's voice cracked. Mom, I didn't mean... I looked at him calm. You did. Maybe not forever, but enough for it to matter. And that's what hurts, because I raised you to know better. His shoulders caved. I didn't reach for him. I'd done that all my life, reaching, fixing, forgiving too soon. Claire tried again, her voice breaking. You can't just erase your family. I turned toward her. You erased me first. The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They landed heavy and exact. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint buzz of the lights above. Emma began gathering the documents, her movements precise, measured. She slid one final sheet toward me. Mrs. Grace, she said, all property and assets are now reinstated in your name. Do you wish to proceed with full ownership transfer? Yes. My pen didn't shake this time. Each stroke of ink landed like a heartbeat, finding its rhythm after years of interruption. When I finished, Emma signed as witness. Done, she said softly. Daniel buried his face in his hands. What happens now? Now, I said, we live with what we built. He looked up desperate. Can't we start over? Maybe, I said, but not from lies. Not from that day. I stood, gathered my bag, and turned toward the hallway. I didn't come here to fight or humiliate anyone. I came to close the door you slammed. Before leaving, I looked back once. Daniel sat pale and still. Claire's eyes were wide, not angry now, afraid. Emma met my gaze, steady, silent. Thank you, I said. Justice isn't always loud, she replied. I nodded. No, I said, but it's permanent. The room stayed quiet as I walked out. No one followed. At the doorway, I paused. The long table gleamed under the white light. Untouched cups of coffee, untouched apologies. Emma's folder lay open, the top page stamped in bold. Clause 14B executed. The sound of my heels crossed the floor, 1, 2, 3, then stopped as the door closed behind me. If a camera had been there, it would have caught my eyes. Calm, certain, unflinching. For the first time, I didn't look like a mother asking to be heard. I looked like a woman who finally was. The room was still when Emma reached into her bag and placed a small recorder on the table. She didn't slam it down like evidence. She set it there gently, like truth itself was fragile. I'd like you all to listen to something, she said. Her tone carried the kind of calm that only comes when the facts are already on your side. Daniel frowned. What is that? Emma pressed play. At first there was static, a low hum, the kind that sounds like time itself hesitating. Then, through the crackle, came a voice none of us had heard in years. Peter's voice. "If you're hearing this," he began, steady and certain, "then I'm no longer there to speak for her. So I'll say this once. If you hurt her, you lose everything. The house, the inheritance, the name, all of it. She carried you when no one else would. She deserves peace, not pity. Respect her, or let the law remind you what you forgot." The air changed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, exact. Daniel froze mid-breath. Claire's fingers twitched against the table. Even Emma's eyes softened for a moment before she clicked the recorder off. The faint hum of the lights returned, small and mechanical against what had just broken open. Daniel whispered, "That was Dad." "Yes," I said, and he meant every word. Emma straightened, her professionalism returning like armor. "As executor of Mr. Grace's will, this recording serves as direct verification of intent. Under Clause 14B, the estate transfers in full to Mrs. Evelyn Grace." She slid the official document across the table. The red seal at the bottom read "executed." That one word landed harder than any argument could. Claire's hand shook, her glass slipped from her grasp, shattering against the floor, a sharp, echoing punctuation mark. The light above us flickered once, twice, before settling. Daniel's voice cracked. "Mom, please. You don't have to do this. We can talk. We can fix it." I looked at him. The man who once called me Mommy, the same mouth that had told me to get out. "You said this wasn't my home," I said quietly. "Now it isn't yours either." The words didn't rise. They didn't need to. They cut clean, quiet precision, not anger. He blinked, stunned. Claire's eyes darted between us, wide and glassy, searching for a sentence that didn't exist. Emma gathered the last of her papers. "All assets and ownership are hereby reinstated under Mrs. Grace," she said, "effective immediately." Daniel's shoulders collapsed. "Dad wouldn't have wanted this," he muttered. Emma met his eyes. "Your father wanted his wife safe. That's the only thing he made unbreakable." Daniel stared down at his hands, his knuckles white, his breath uneven. "I didn't think it would go this far." "That's the problem," I said softly. "You never think past yourself." There was no venom left in my voice, just exhaustion, the kind that builds after 40 years of being the one who holds everything together. He leaned back, eyes wet but defiant. "So that's it? You just take everything?" I shook my head. "No, I'm just keeping what's mine." Emma closed the briefcase with a quiet snap. "This meeting is concluded." The overhead light buzzed once more, then steadied. The silence that followed wasn't peace. It was aftermath. Claire stared down at the shards of glass at her feet, her whisper barely audible. Maybe it was an apology. Maybe it was nothing at all. Daniel's hands covered his face. He didn't cry. He just sat there breathing, shallow and uneven, like a man realizing that losing isn't loud. It's quiet. It's permanent. For a long moment, no one moved. I looked at him, not with hate, not even with disappointment, just clarity. Peter's voice still echoed somewhere inside me. "If you hurt her, you lose everything." That wasn't vengeance. That was law written in love. I turned to Emma. "Thank you," I said. She smiled faintly. "He'd be proud of you." He always said I'd never need to raise my voice, but I replied, "Turns out I didn't have to." Outside, the rain began, soft at first, then steady, hitting the windows like a metronome marking the end of something. I picked up my folder, slipped the recorder inside, and clicked it shut. "This isn't revenge," I said, more to the room than to them. "It's remembrance." Emma followed me to the door. Before stepping out, I looked back one last time. Daniel sat slumped, head bowed, the light glinting off tears that refused to fall. Behind him, the framed photo still smiled from another life. For half a second, I almost reached for him. Almost. But some distances aren't closed by reaching, only by remembering. I stepped outside. The door closed softly behind me. The rain grew louder, wrapping the night like a steady pulse. The rain hadn't stopped all day. It drummed against the windows, ran down the glass in thin silver streams, steady, relentless, patient. The kind of rain that doesn't ask to be noticed. It just reminds you it's there. I sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold. The papers were signed, the calls were finished. The house, my house, was mine again. For the first time in months, there was quiet. Not victory, not relief. Just quiet. The kind you have to earn. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. A pause. 2 more. Not urgent. Just inevitable. I stood and opened the door. Daniel stood there, soaked to the bone. His coat clung to him, water dripping onto the porch. Behind him, Claire hovered. 1 step back, face pale, mascara washed thin by the rain. He tried to speak, his lips trembling. "Mom, please. We lost everything." I looked at him, not with anger, not even with pity, just with clarity. I saw the man my son had become, a man who mistook control for care, ownership for love. "You lost respect first," I said. The sentence landed between us like a truth too heavy to move. He blinked, swallowed. "I know," he said quietly, "and I can't undo it." Rainwater slid from his sleeves to the floor, a growing puddle between us. Claire reached out halfway to his shoulder, then stopped. Her eyes darted to mine, searching, pleading, for forgiveness, for mercy, for anything that would make it easier. I stepped aside just enough for the hallway light to fall across both their faces. The glow made them look smaller, younger, like figures in a faded photograph. Daniel dropped to his knees on the wet tile. His voice broke. "I'm sorry, for everything. For what I said. For what I did. I didn't understand until it was gone. The house. The life. You." I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is the answer. He pressed on, his breath uneven. "We thought we were doing what was right for us, but we forgot who made it right for us in the first place." Behind him, Claire's voice was barely a whisper. "Mrs. Grace, we didn't mean for it to go that far. I was angry. I thought—" I stopped her gently. "You thought I'd stay quiet." She hesitated, then nodded, eyes down. "Yes." Outside, the rain thickened, the steady kind that swallows every sound except its own rhythm. I looked back at Daniel. His eyes were red, tired, wet, not from rain anymore. I wanted to touch his face, to wipe it away the way I used to when he scraped his knees, but the distance between us wasn't measured in steps. It was in choices. "You want to make it right?" I asked. "Yes," he said, voice breaking. "Then start by living with what you built," I told him. "Not with guilt, with change. Earn back respect, not from me, from the world." He nodded weakly. "Can I come in?" I shook my head. "Not tonight." His shoulders fell. The answer wasn't punishment, it was boundary. "This isn't about closing doors," I said. "It's about keeping them strong enough not to be forced again." Claire's eyes glistened. She looked at Daniel, the realization settling in. This wasn't a conversation she could charm her way through. She reached for him, but he didn't move. He stayed kneeling, drenched, still. I whispered, "Get up, son." He hesitated, then stood. Water dripped from his coat onto the floor like time slipping through fingers. "I'll try," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "That's all that matters now." We stood there, mother, son, and daughter-in-law, framed in that narrow beam of light. Behind me, a candle flickered on the table. Its glow brushed across a photograph on the wall, Peter in the garden, smiling like he already knew this moment would come. Daniel turned first. His steps were heavy but deliberate. Claire followed, slower. Just before the corner, she looked back once. A single step, a small fracture in pride. Then she was gone. I closed the door gently. The latch clicked, the sound almost tender. I leaned against the wood and listened to the rain. It was still steady, still relentless. But it didn't sound cold anymore. It sounded clean. "Some endings don't come with closure," I whispered to the quiet. "They come with distance, enough to breathe, enough to heal. Sometimes love isn't opening the door. It's keeping it closed long enough to remember who you are." Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, everything, finally, was still. The next morning, the rain had stopped. The world outside my window looked scrubbed clean. Soft light on wet pavement, the quiet after everything breaks and then settles again. I called Daniel. He sounded surprised that I even wanted to see him, but I told him to come, just him and Claire. There was something I needed to hand over. We met in the same apartment where, a week earlier, the storm had nearly drowned his apology. Now, sunlight pooled across the floor, and the air smelled new. I didn't ask them to sit. I just handed Daniel a thin envelope. You should read this, I said. He hesitated, then opened it. His eyes moved across the page once, twice. Then he looked up. You sold the house? I nodded. To the Home Haven Foundation. The room went still. Then Claire's voice cracked through it. You can't just give away our home. I met her gaze, calm but sharp enough to hold. It was never yours, I said. It was built by hands that knew sacrifice, not entitlement. She went silent. Daniel stared at the papers again. Why? He asked softly. Why not keep it? It was all you had left. Because it was never meant to be a monument to pain, I said. Home Haven will turn it into housing for women like me, widows, seniors, anyone forced out of their own lives. Your father volunteered there years ago. He helped fix their roofs, patch their walls, repair what was broken. I thought maybe the house could keep doing that, even without us. Daniel's throat tightened. I didn't know he did that. No, I said gently. You never asked. He blinked fast, tears collecting. I'm sorry, Mom. I know. He stepped closer, his voice trembling. What do I do now? I rested a hand on his shoulder, the same way I used to when he came home unsure of himself. You start again, I said. Not from what you lost, from what you've learned. He nodded, his tears falling freely now. Behind him, Claire spoke, quiet, stripped of pride. We don't deserve this. Deserve isn't the point, I replied. Understanding is. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint ticking of the clock and the light wind outside. Daniel folded the document carefully, his fingers trembling. He didn't hand it back. He just held it, like it finally meant something. I forgive you, I said, my voice steady. But I won't undo the lesson. He nodded slowly. I know. Outside, the last drops of rain slid off the balcony rail. Sunlight spilled through the glass, catching on the edge of the paper, the seal of the sale glowing faintly, Home Haven Foundation printed bold and final. We stood there, 3 people no longer trying to win, just trying to understand. We spend our lives building homes thinking they'll keep us safe, I said quietly. But a house means nothing if the people inside forget how to love. Sometimes, the only way to rebuild is to let go, not out of anger, but out of grace. I turned toward the window. The light touched the paper again. Soft, steady, unwavering. And for the first time, the name Grace finally felt like what it was meant to be. A year later, the world had grown smaller, and better for it. The cabin sat on the edge of the forest in Sister's Oregon. Just wood, wind, and quiet. No locks to change, no voices raised, no walls echoing with what used to be, only stillness, earned and honest. The kettle on the stove was the same one Peter and I had used for decades. It whistled slower now, but so did I. Every morning I brewed 1 cup of tea, sat by the window and wrote small notes, to myself, to the past, to whoever might need them someday. That afternoon a knock came at the door, a soft, familiar rhythm, 3 taps and a pause. When I opened it, there was Oliver, the young motel clerk from that stormy night. He looked older now, more sure of himself, but still carried that same gentle smile. Mrs. Grace, he said, wiping his boots on the mat. I was passing through and thought I'd stop by. I've got something to show you. He set a laptop on the table and flipped it open. You remember the Home Haven Foundation? The program you helped fund with the house sale? They started a podcast called The Lighthouse Letters. I smiled. That's a beautiful name. He pressed play. The small cabin filled with voices, soft, raw, full of life. Women of all ages spoke about the homes they lost and the ones they rebuilt, about silence, survival, and light finding its way back in. Then I heard my own voice through the speakers, quiet, steady, older now but certain. Light doesn't beg to be seen, it shines anyway. Oliver looked up, eyes bright. That was you, wasn't it? I nodded. Peter used to say that when he fixed lights at the fire station. He said broken things still deserved to glow. We sat in silence for a while listening, not just to stories, but to proof. Proof that something once broken could keep shining long after. When the episode ended, Oliver turned the screen toward me. They said they're naming the next series after you, he said. The Grace stories. I laughed softly. Tell them not to. I'm no saint. He grinned. You don't have to be. You just have to tell the truth. The light outside shifted. That warm, honey-colored hour before dusk. The cabin glowed from within, spilling soft gold across the trees. Oliver closed the laptop. For a moment, the only sound was the forest. The slow breath of branches, a bird calling somewhere unseen. We didn't speak again. We didn't need to. Some stories don't end, I thought. They just change houses. The forest seemed to agree, quiet, luminous, listening. And as the last light fell across the cabin window, I realized something simple and whole. Grace wasn't just my name. It was what remained. Morning came slow, the kind of dawn that doesn't chase darkness away, just softens it. Evelyn stood by the cabin door, her fingers resting on the old brass handle. When she pushed it open, the cool air met her skin like a quiet welcome. Outside, the lake was still. Mist floated across the surface, glowing faintly in the early light. The world didn't look new. It looked rested. Peace had finally taken root. She stepped onto the porch, tea in hand, and breathed deeply. Pine, damp earth, and morning sun. No voices, no locks, no fear, just quiet. Inside, the small recorder on the table blinked red, still on. The last thing she'd said into it the night before played back softly. I didn't lose a home. I found a world that finally listened. Her voice lingered in the air like the echo of a tide that finally came home. Evelyn smiled once, gently, then turned toward the horizon. The light reached her face, warm, patient, kind, and stayed. From a distance, the cabin glowed faintly through the fog. Not a warning, not a plea, just a light that stayed.